Alright, Paul, the belt just arrived today, so I'm going to try to get that installed now. It'll just go around this motor pulley and around the flywheel. Then we'll put back the 4 screws holding in this main bracket. And after that, I guess the rest of it can pretty much be assembled and tested. Now I've gotten the belt roughly fitted on here, so I'm thinking if I just put these 4 screws back in for that large bracket and turn this by hand, the belt should align itself on the proper raised part of this flywheel. So I have these 4 screws to put back in the rear. This will be held in place. And put this sensor back on here. And this should be ready to go as far as the main parts of the mechanism. Okay, it's all installed. Those screws were definitely difficult to get at again, but this is looking good. It's turning properly here. So I think this should be able to spin in both directions for the auto reverse. Now I just noticed something fortunate. In the other video I mentioned something about the oiling tubes to lubricate the motors. So this center capstan motor had 2 oiling tubes in the back that are accessible, and I showed that before. But for these other 2 motors, like the rewind and fast forward motors on your take up and supply reels, they're actually accessible through the front behind here. So here's at least 1 oiling tube for this motor. I'm pretty sure these are only going to have 1 oiling tube for each of these motors, since the motors themselves are a little smaller than the main one. And the oiling tube for this other motor is behind here, so you see that right there. So I might need to lay the deck down on its back to just get a syringe in there and put a little bit of oil down those tubes to have these motors properly lubricated and oiled. But I'm thankful that I noticed that, because honestly I wasn't sure where the tubes were for these 2 motors. So here's your pinch roller. Looks pretty good. It doesn't have too many dented spots really. That little spot there is only on the outside, so that's not too bad. The important thing is that the rubber's not really dried out or cracked. But anyway, there's an E-clip on here, so that can come off. And then I'll also probably just put a drop of oil on here and clean this out. And I think before I reassemble the whole faceplate, I might just quickly test this and press the transport buttons here. So anyhow, this is your auto stop lever here. It's got a return spring, so when this is all the way to the right, the main capstan doesn't actually turn. There's a micro switch behind here, as you can hear. But when you pull this to the side, or when a tape is threaded up and loaded, when this is moved over, it actually starts up your capstan, and it'll start turning even if the reels aren't moving or the transport's not engaging. If this is moved to the side, it'll still run your flywheel and capstan here. So anyhow, then when you press either the forward or the reverse playback button, that should engage the solenoid here, and your pinch roller should automatically bring itself up to the capstan spindle here. And this all moves freely since I cleaned the old grease out and re-lubed it. But your pinch roller would just go in here, and then when you hit your play button, it should snap this back up against the capstan spindle. Your tape would be in between right here. And then when you hit your stop button, it should drop itself back down. So it should just be free like that. But yeah, I'm going to try to take this E-clip out and oil this up a little bit inside. So I popped off the E-clip. Underneath is a little washer. You don't want to lose that. Then this front part comes out like that. This still might need to be cleaned too. And there's a washer on the other side. This is hard to get apart, so I'm sure it needs some oil. So I'll just take this syringe and put a little bit of oil in here. There's still some of that dried out foam around this bearing again, like there was for the flywheel. I'll have to clean this up with some alcohol probably. Put that back together and put the E-clip back on. That should be good to go. And then I'll clean this out a little bit, put a drop of oil in there. It should be running smoothly after that. Just put the pinch roller back together, put it in here. Turns freely. So I'm just going to quickly oil these motors with these oiling tubes here. And plug the power back in and test that everything runs with the belt when you move this over. And see if the transport engages properly. I mean, these motors themselves would turn anyway regardless of this belt being here, but still make sure it all engages and works smoothly. Okay, so let's see what happens now. This is the power button here. I forgot to put that pilot lamp back in there. I think I put that in one of these bags over here, but power, so those lamps are good. I'll pull this over and see if this turns. So that's running properly, nice and smooth. Actually, I might need two hands to hit the playback button, so I can't really do that. Here we go. So here's the forward playback. And when we release this auto stop lever, it should stop everything and disengage the pinch roller. So the pinch roller itself is spinning right now, and the capstan and flywheel are turning. So that stops everything, and the brakes are good. You got your reverse direction. So that engages after it switches the relay, so at least that's working properly. I wonder if I can test the auto reverse if I short these two together with a metal object to simulate the sensing foil going by. Like if I have it in the forward direction now, see, it just did that. So the sensor's good, and it should be able to auto reverse with the sensing foil on the back side of the tape. So that's working properly. And then we can also test fast forward and rewind. So for that, you hold down the fast button, hit the right arrow for fast forward or the left for rewind. So that's fast forward. Rewind. And I think if it's playing, you might be able to hit either fast forward or rewind. Or you'd hit the fast button, I think, and it would do that. So with all the mechanical stuff tested and working, I should be ready to reassemble the faceplate and address some of the electrical issues after I start testing this further. Okay, so I'm going to start reassembling this now. It's pretty much the reverse of the disassembly process. So you put that little rubber pad thing around these transport buttons. Then I think just put the faceplate on and all the other appropriate screws. So now I want to try to give this faceplate a good cleaning before I put this back on. It's kind of filthy, so try to get this looking as best as we can. All the main parts of the faceplate are reassembled now. So we've got the 4 corner screws and this ring here. I put the pinch roller back in, and then the arm on the left here. So now I'm gonna put these reel tables back together. So we have to put those 2 spacers on each side. I labeled these left and right just to keep everything straight. So you put those 2 spacers on there. I've got the 2 for the left side here. You've got to line up all the holes in here to get the screws through. And then put the tables on. Alright, check it out, Paul. Got a tape loaded on here. This is just one of the random tapes I had, so I'm not sure what music is on here, but as I said before, I have these large rubber feet, so these will work fine as reel holders, and they stay held on well even with fast forward and rewind and all that. So here's the playback. So far I notice the right channel might be dead, since this right meter isn't responding at all. The left one's got good level on it. Of course the meter goes higher the higher you crank the output. And I could tell this output level potentiometer was really dirty, because even as I turned this, it kind of, you could see some noise in there with the meters going nuts, just from dirt and crud inside this pot. See, now in the reverse direction you've got output from both channels. And also I tested the buttons for the speeds, so both speeds worked. This is 3 3/4 inches per second, and here's 7.5, so that's all working good. Huh. Now we've got outputs from both channels in the forward direction. Sure, I probably still need to clean things out a bit. This is still kind of intermittent with the right channel. See, now I still have nothing. But so far this seems like it'll be a good unit. Alright, I'm trying to get the rear of this kind of cleaned out from all the dust and everything. One thing I sort of just realized is this is still slightly different to my older A-4010S model. My deck was a particularly early one from 1967. This is made in 71. But mine actually had the playback amplifier circuit board tucked up in here, and that was kind of a removable card with a long connector on it that would plug into. So in the case of this unit, I think all the playback amplifier electronics might still be in the amplifier down here. So we'll just have to look into that. I'm going to get this metal panel back together, and then maybe we can try to pull the amp out and adjust some of the electronics. Okay, I got that back panel together. So now as far as the electronics are concerned and cleaning the switches and pots, to get the amp out, you've got these 4 screws on the front. The whole thing should slide out. I'm not sure about those cables or the wiring through the back. Even with the earlier A-4010S models rather than the SL, I think there's at least 2 or 3 different revisions of those throughout the years, so everything's still a bit different internally. But we'll get these 4 screws out. This amp should slide out. I just have to check if the wiring through the back has removable plugs. Okay, so I've got the amp pulled out. I've removed this screw and this screw from here to get the top cover off. Oh, actually there's 2 other screws in the back I didn't see from all the dust. Alright, I got into this. Unfortunately this screw here kind of stripped out, so I had to sort of tear this cover piece off of there, but hopefully I can like straighten that out with a hammer or something. But anyhow, the one wire here came out from right there. It's just clipped in. This one here has this long bolt going through the front, so I just took a small nut off of there. Then this connector here pulled out, so now the whole amp is separate from the deck. As for the record not working, these relays are typically responsible for that. On some of the original A-4010S models like mine, they had different revisions for the amp, so they have different model numbers, but anyway, the relays themselves aren't always removable unless they have these little wire clip things here. So you can just slide those over. And as long as they have those, they should be removable, and these just go into sockets. So then you can take the plastic covers off of these and take some kind of business card with textured paper, and you can run it between these contacts to clean any oxidation if there is any. So at least these are removable, because some of them aren't. So there's 3 of those in here, and the other amps on the A-4010S models usually only have 2 relays, and this has 3. Then the bias oscillator is under here, and your filter caps are in here. So these 2 trimmers here, I'm assuming, would adjust your bias current for the different types of tape. Then you've got other trimmers in here, so some of these might be for record levels and output levels and things of that nature. I'm pretty sure the schematic for the A-4010SL should still be on hi-fi engine, so I might poke through some of that, but at the very least, before I tear into any soldering related things, I want to just try to clean out the relays and then get some of my deoxit to spray the switches in these pots. Actually, I think this will have a bottom cover too, so I'm hoping these screws won't be over torqued like the ones were for the top. We'll have to get under here too and get into these potentiometers here and spray them. Oh, this is a pain. All those screws pretty much wanted to strip out. But so when it comes to this deck having issues engaging into the record mode, there's one other thing I kind of forgot to check, and it relates to the pinch roller linkage mechanism. So when the pinch roller is in its resting position at the bottom, it's supposed to be pressing against this micro switch here to engage it, and this is the pinch roller solenoid here. So if you look it up on forums and things, it kind of mentions this as an issue as to why some of the decks might not engage into the record mode anymore. Now this spring mechanism here actually adjusts the pinch roller pressure, which I don't really want to tamper with, and upon closer inspection it turns out there's 2 screws here holding in a metal bracket that holds the micro switch, and it's actually got little slotted holes, so I think I might just be able to slide this over and tighten those screws, and then I can have this bracket piece here actually press against the switch. So I think I can just slide this further over and tighten those screws down, and this will engage the switch. And that might be all the issue is with why this won't engage into record mode. The deck is actually designed not to allow the thing to go into record mode unless this switch is made before the transport mechanism engages and the tape starts going. Of course, the tape would have to be stopped. You'd have to press and hold those 2 buttons on the front to engage the micro switches, and this one here would have to be engaged when the pinch roller is disengaged, and the record mode would then operate. So I'm going to try this out. I actually have some of this stuff reassembled without the faceplate just so I can keep an eye on that switch and try to adjust this and see if I can get it to work. So that's what we're going to be doing next. Okay, so luckily I was able to slide that further over, and with the pinch roller disengaged in its resting position, it is pressing that micro switch in. Now I'm pushing up on the pinch roller by hand. It's disengaging that switch like it's supposed to. So I won't know for sure if this is all that was causing the issue until I test it. But I'll have to just put the amp back in here and then see if I can test the record function and see if it works. Well, this seems to have been part of the problem. So it doesn't appear that the right channel is engaging into record mode. I might have to hook up some kind of input source to this just to see if I can get a signal recorded onto the tape and to see if the right channel is still defective or if it's this lamp, because it could still be a an issue with the relays themselves or other electronics inside. I could still slide this amp out and try to test it further to see if the relays are engaging in here, if they move when I try to engage the record mode. That's actually the issue I was having for years with my 4010S from 1967, is only one channel would engage into the record mode. I've been trying to track that down for a long time, and that thing's just been on the back burner, unfortunately. But I don't know if that'll be a similar issue with this, or exactly what's going on. Alright, actually this is strange. I swapped the two relays themselves, and now only the right one is engaging, so there might be some kind of issue with the relay itself. So that's exactly what's happening. I just double checked this again. When the right channel engages into record mode, it's energizing this middle relay here. So there's some issue with this number 2 relay here, where it's not energizing. There's a possibility that it could be this coil in here. Not sure if that could have gone open or something, but it's possible. Paul, I got it! Look at that, both of these are on. I took this relay apart again and just tried cleaning those contacts, and I sprayed a tiny bit of deoxit between some of them very carefully, and now they're both engaged in the record mode. That's great. Can probably just reassemble the faceplate again and then maybe hook it up to my stereo and see if we can get a signal laid down onto the tape just to test things out. It's another thing going forward with the rest of this is actually just trying to see if we have even record levels and playback levels, because there's a bunch of trimmers in here, and I might have to consult one of the service manuals to find out some of the adjustments for that, and also to make sure we don't have any noise, because if there's like excess noise and hiss, then possibly some of the transistors and or capacitors could be starting to go inside. I'm definitely glad this seems to be working, and it at least engages into record mode on both channels now. But that's somewhat of a common issue with some of these Teacs, specifically the 4010 models, like either the S or the SL, or even the GSL, which is probably a bit newer than this and has glass heads. Is either just this micro switch here or the relays in there. Alright, Paul, I'm testing this out some more now. So I just have a random old tape of mine on here for testing purposes to try to record on this. It is recording, but I'm not sure the audio is entirely clean. It should sound nearly as good as the input source audio, ideally, so I don't know if I'll need to recap some of the amplifier, like maybe the output stage, or if I might just need to try to tweak the bias trimmers a little bit. Alright, so I'll try to just cue up something I think shouldn't have copyright infringement issues. But then you have your monitor switch here, so this is between the input audio and your tape output from the playhead. So this is the input source, which sounds clean. And this is the tape playback, so not nearly as clear. And also, your frequency response will be better at 7.5 IPS rather than 3 3/4. Like if I drop this down, it'll probably sound even worse.
Somebody steps across the room. I can't tell you that's only good for sleeping.
It's probably just the bias.
Oh, wait, hate myself, I'm angry at you.
So I probably need to tweak some of the trimmers in here And also the record levels, I'm not sure if these record levels are necessarily even. Because I've got these two concentric pots even.
People don't.
They're not exactly even.
Saturday night, it's a good night, going out and drinking.
So I probably just need to consult the service manual.
When it was fun, they called it party.
See if I can adjust everything better in here, but it is recording.
Then call back if the phone smack.
It just doesn't sound as clear as it could, I would think. So now we can rewind this a little bit and play it back. Should still sound the same as what we heard before from the tape monitor. So there's your playback.
I'm away to hate myself, I'm angry at you.
But actually, I think there should...
Trying to convince myself.
I think there's probably separate trimmer pots inside for both the normal and the high bias positions on here. So the high bias is for some higher quality tape. If you have, I think, low noise or extended range tapes, which I might have a couple somewhere. Like if you have any decent TDK or Maxell tape. But this particular one's probably just a normal. Sometimes on the VU meters there will be different levels indicated, which I don't think this shows that, but on some Teacs, like my big one up here, this is an A-4010SL, but it's got different parts of the meters. If you see, it says normal and high, so you can get better record levels and signal to noise ratio with the higher bias tapes and all that kind of stuff, which is pretty cool. But anyhow, kind of getting late. I think it's like about midnight now, so I gotta wrap it up. The auto stop's working good. The brakes are good. And that's about it for right now. So it's definitely came pretty far, and we're almost all the way there. So yeah, like I said, I'll probably just have to consult the service manual, see if there's any specifications for how to adjust the bias and whatnot. I don't know exactly what technical equipment you would need for calibration type of stuff, but I say you can probably even get a phone app and just send like a standard sine wave in to adjust record levels and that stuff, but yeah, we'll get her going.